Okay, thank you for coming back to part 2 of the video. And the second part to common factoring is what is called common factoring by grouping. In this question, common factoring by grouping usually has 4 terms, and as you can see, the coefficients are 4, 20, 5, and 25. There's no number other than 1 that can divide into those 4 coefficients. And all 4 terms do not have an x, so you might think there is no greatest common factor. Well, let's take a look at this. If you take a look at just the first 2 terms, you have 4x cubed plus 20x squared. Are you able to common factor that? Is there a number that divides into 4 and 20? The biggest number would be 4. Is there an x in both terms? Yes. The lowest exponent is 2, so in the first 2 terms, the greatest common factor would be 4x squared. So, put a box around the first 2 terms and common factor the first 2 terms. So, the greatest common factor is 4x squared, and when you divide this by 4x squared, you get x. When you divide this by 4x squared, you get 5. Now, look at the second 2 terms, 5x plus 25. That has a common factor of 5. So out of the second 2 terms, we're going to common factor out of 5. So put a box around the second 2 terms. The greatest common factor is 5. When you divide this term by 5, you get x. When you divide this term by 5, you get 5. So common factor the first 2 terms and the second 2 terms. Now, the 2 binomials that you get, so this binomial and this binomial, should always be equal. If they are not equal, it means that you haven't done the common factoring correct. Now, that means out of this part and this part, the x plus 5 is the greatest common factor. So, the greatest common factor comes out first. If you divide this part by x plus 5, you are left with 4x squared. And if you divide this part by x plus 5, you are left with 5. And that is your final answer. So when you factor by grouping, what you are doing is really undoing the FOILing process. If you wanted to check your answer, x times 4x squared is 4x cubed. X times 5 is 5x. 5 times 4x squared is 20x squared. 5 times 5 is 25. And if you write them in descending powers of x, which is your correct mathematical way of writing out your terms, you get the answer that you started with. So let's go over that again, because I know sometimes that gets a bit confusing. So example 2, put a box around the first 2 terms and common factor. There's no number that divides into 3 and 5, but they both have an r, and the lowest exponent is 2, so your common factor is r squared. If you divide each of these by r squared, 3r cubed divided by r squared is 3r. Negative 5r squared divided by r squared is negative 5. Now, put a box around the second two terms. The biggest number that divides into 6 and 10 is 2, but remember the first term is negative, so you're going to factor out the negative with it. There is not an r in both terms, so your greatest common factor is just negative 2. If you divide this term by negative 2, you get 3r. If you do divide this term by negative 2, you get negative 5. Once again, the two brackets are the same. So in your answer, the first factor is 3r minus 5, and your second factor is made up of what is left over, r squared minus 2. And that's how you factor by grouping when there are 4 terms. So take a minute, pause the video, try these two examples on your own. Remember, box the first two, common factor, box the second two, common factor. The two brackets should be the same. When you're done, play the video to check your answers. So pause now and try example 1 and 2. Alright, here are your answers, so if you want to check them over. If there's anything from this lesson that you did not understand, please make note of it and ask your teacher during class the next day. Hope you enjoyed learning how to common factor. Bye-bye.